Welcome to the 4 p.m. work session of the Bowling Green Board of Commissioners for June 4th, 2013. We've got a couple items on our work session today, the first being an economic development update and review of the ITA fiscal year and operating budget and a financial audit for 2012. Mr. Febo.
Thank you, Mayor. When the City of Bowling Green made a decision to issue a general obligation bond a number of years ago in support of the ITA, and in partnership with Warren County, one of the requirements of that rebonding was for the ITA to present its annual operating budget to the City Commission. Recently, as the Commission knows, we passed a policy that will allow the ITA and its administrative staff to use proceeds from the occupational assessment at the Transpart to be used to help complete the infrastructure needs there. This is being done through the apparatus of the operating budget, thus giving a whole new importance to the review and passage of the ITA operation budget. On behalf of the ITA today is Meredith Robinson, who is the CFO. She's going to present the budget and to tell you the exciting news about how they plan to use the assessment revenue to finish the park.
Ms. Meredith, go right ahead.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you, Mr. DeFebo. I've been advised to be brief, and I will happily oblige that request. I do want to point out a few things. You have before you in front of you a larger version of the map because I know this is awfully hard to read. But we are tasked through the ITA of developing the Transpark. Just a couple of items to point out to you for this past fiscal year. As you'll remember, we did spec building. We were calling it spec building 3, but going back to the records, it's actually spec building 4. It was completed and sold in December of 2012. So we are now happily moving on to spec building 5. The ITA board has voted for us to start due diligence, and it will be built down here on lot 15. And then also you'll see as we go through the budget, we completed the road right-of-way sale for the I-65 connector. So all of the points along here that touched ITA property have been sold, and that has been closed out. As part of that sale process, working with Mr. Meisel and your bond counsel, we found that we can call the bonds basically in reverse order so that it frees up the payment that would be related to the taxable bonds. So as we work through the budget, you'll see that those funds will actually be redirected for the upcoming year as well to help feather the nest, as Mr. DeFebo says, to finish out the infrastructure to the park. So obviously we have a long list of infrastructure needs, but nobody wants to come before the body and ask for additional bonds. So we're going to be as creative as we can to avoid ever having to do that. Going on to the next one. This is a 9-year average of our wage assessment. You'll see we had a slight dip for the recession in the 2008-2009 timeframe. We are on a rebound. While this fiscal year is not complete, based on projections to date, we anticipate ending up around $812,000. And you'll see in the upcoming budget, we're budgeting a modest increase of 3% for that, even though we expect it to be higher with output coming online. This is the revenue side of our budget. Just a couple items to note here. Rental income, you'll see an increase over the 2012 budget from 36 to 66. In addition to trying to be good stewards of the money, we have rented out the ITA office to Goodwill. We've pulled all the staff back to the chamber. So you'll see an increase in income, and also when we get over to the expenses, you'll see a decrease in the expenses. So we're trying to be the best fiscal agents that we can. As you'll see, we've had a steady increase in the wage assessment, anticipating a budget of $836 for the upcoming year. That is conservative. And here on the farm lease income, you'll see a decrease in that. Related to building the spec building, the ITA does lease out the land currently. Since we're going to be consuming the land, if you will, we'll have to cancel those farm leases, so that's why we're projecting a decrease there. Lease revenue is the bond payment, the principal amount that's due for the year. And you'll notice the difference between projected and budget is this other income number that will be freed up related to the early call of the taxable bonds for the upcoming year. Wait, first one thing. Also, please note the $2.1 million for the right-of-way sale. that's a good number. On the cash operating expenditure side, the green line actually represents the BKD business plan that was originally done back in 2001 to explain what they projected the operating expenses of the ITA to be for the Transpark. The blue line is actual. You'll notice we're trying to do a much better job of controlling those expenses. Per the agreement with the city, we've said that we will keep our expenses under $450, and for the upcoming year, we're looking at about $416,000 for operating expenses. This is the expenditure side of the budget. Not really any major things to point out. One, on the management fees, per previous agreement, we budgeted a 3% increase, and that was per the deal that we've worked out with you guys previously. Also, I wanted to point out on professional fees, the increase you see there is that the ITA has agreed to take on the audit responsibility for the RDA as well, since there's not a funding mechanism for that sister public entity, so that's related to the increase. And then you'll see a decrease, as mentioned, in repairs and maintenance, telephone, utilities. That's related to the rental of the office. So we do anticipate those expenses to continue to stay down. Going on to capital expenditures, at the beginning of the current fiscal year, we had $346,000 in a bond fund. We anticipate spending another $30,000 of that on some due diligence that we're doing out at the Transpark before the end of the fiscal year, leaving a balance of $316,000. We anticipate $416,000 of wage assessment over and above our operating expenses that would be available for capital expenditures. Here's the $395,000 coming forward from the bonds, as previously discussed, giving us a available amount of $1.1 for the upcoming fiscal year. And so we're looking at about $1.1 million worth of infrastructure improvements that we can do within the confines of our existing budget. Next slide, real quick, is just a listing of those anticipated projects for the upcoming fiscal year. Adding a Commonwealth railroad crossing. You'll see that on your big map, the rail spur that winds into Lot 6 that crosses what would be the Commonwealth extension. We would want to make that a safe travel way, so putting in that rail crossing. There's a lot of due diligence on the other lots out there that is yet to be completed related to soil borings, phase 1 electric resistivity testing, that type of thing. So we just want to make sure we've got our house in order, we've got everything ready to go. So if a prospect picks up the phone and calls tomorrow, we can do that. Other things, sinkhole remediation, a virtual building. This may be new to some people. One of the things in the world of economic development is having the spec building as we typically build, but also having a site that's ready. It's graded. We've got a building that's already engineered, and we've got a construction timeline from a company that's locked in. A lot of companies want an existing building, but if you don't have an existing building, a graded plat is the next best thing. And so we want to make sure we maintain that pipeline of raw land, graded plat, and then spec buildings, and just kind of keep that rolling. But I will caveat this to say that this is our plan. If we get a call tomorrow that's a really great project and they want something completely different, we're going to do something completely different to get that really great project. And just a little bit of bragging. On the economic development announcements for the 2012 calendar year, we had $45 million worth of capital investment, 271 jobs. One thing I would point out on Sumitomo in Metcalf, while it says 0 jobs, that the ability for us to work that expansion actually saved 266 jobs that would have left the area. So while it's not new jobs created, it was still a huge win for our area. And for 2013, we're off to a bang. $91 million in capital investment and 197 jobs. And I would tell you to stay tuned because we're just getting warmed up. I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Any questions from Ms. Robinson? Mr. Fibbo?
Yeah, Meredith, this is for the coming year, the work program. In future years, is there an overall master plan for completing the Transpark infrastructure?
Yes, we have a 5-year plan that we've put together that shows what we're projecting the anticipated wage assessment to be, what we're anticipating the income from the bonds to be, and also from future land sales. The total of that is about $5 million, and then we've got an associated plan of action to get the road work, the infrastructure work done as well. And we anticipate to also take advantage of any state programs that we can to leverage as much of that infrastructure as possible. So if we can get it not paid for locally, that's ideal.
So you plan to finish the Trans-Park infrastructure without new debt?
Yes.
And to use other people's money,
Exactly.
including this assessment? Okay.
Anybody that's not in this room is fair game.
Okay.
Congratulations, great job.
Very good news that you continue to bring with us to us, so thank you very much. Anyone else? Thank you.
Very short, very good.
Brief and concise. Next item on our list of discussion is related to in-kind services and interagency cooperation and exchange.
Thank you, Mayor. At our retreat, we presented at the Commission's request a list of those in-kind services and interagency cooperation exchanges we do. We met with Melinda, and she asked us to, if possible, to quantify those exchanges. So Kate and I, along with Commissioner Hill, have met and put together, for lack of a better term, the gives and gets. And before Kate goes over any one you want to talk about, so there's a general theme here, and that is to provide services. We do all these things because we believe it's important for the city to not only lead, but to collaborate with partners so we can lead together for the good of our citizens, so we can do more and provide more services. So that's the central theme here, and we're working toward that grand balance of how much should be paid and how much should be shared. But Kate has a lot of effort, along with senior management and Commissioner Hill, have put together this paradigm that you find in your packet. I'll turn it over to Kate.
Hi. I don't have a whole lot to say, really, other than to reiterate what Mr. DeFebo has already mentioned. We had provided some information to the board at your January retreat about the in-kind services that the city has provided to various agencies across this community. And from that, we were asked by Commissioner Hill to sort of repackage that information so we could have some more details about the dollars that are involved. So what we've done is we've taken the more significant impacts and interactions that we have. So it's not every single agency, but it's the top agencies that we do participate with, such as Warren County, the school systems, the Convention and Visitors Bureau. We included Western Kentucky University, and I believe the Housing Authority and the Planning Commission are also on that list. And again, this is not meant to be all-inclusive. It is not meant to be everything that the city provides or receives from each of those agencies, but is rather intended to be a more simplistic analysis of the potential benefits and costs received by the city and given by the city, given away by the city. The chart that you have in your packet has 5 columns associated with it. The first column identifies a brief description of the actual service or exchange that we have in place. The second column, that's entitled City Expense, is how much it may cost the city to provide that service. And then there's an approximate savings, so if the city actually receives something in return, then that savings was identified as well. Then there's the fourth column that talks about any revenue sharing we have, and right now there's only, I think, 2 that might be listed for revenue sharing. The collection of the city's property taxes, where they pay administrative fee, I actually entered that as a revenue share. And then also with Western Kentucky University, with the leaf composting, we have a revenue share. And then the fifth column, the agency expense. If known, if there was an expense to the agency for a service we provide to them, then I tried to document that information. Some expenses I won't know completely as to how much it may cost an agency from their end, but also if there were any approximate savings to that agency for a service we provide. and if known, I tried to provide that information. If I didn't know, there may be an explanation as to what a potential savings might be to that agency. For instance, when you look down at the school crossing guards, obviously a potential savings to the school systems is the fact that they don't have to pay those personnel costs because we pay that for them. But I didn't know what a personnel cost would be to them, so I couldn't identify an actual dollar figure for that. You were also given some additional information about the leaf composting agreement that we have with Western and other arrangements or options that we could look into. And department heads are here with me, and Mr. DeFebo, if you have any questions.
Everybody had an opportunity to look over this, and any questions, comments?
So Kate, I have one, please. What is, I think I added the wrong column when I was looking at this. The first column I added and came up with a total over $1 million was the last column, the approximate savings. But to get what it's actually costing the city, it needs to be this first column, column 1, city expenses.
Yes.
Okay.
And each one has, each agency I put a total with, but I apologize, I did not put a total for all of the agencies that we've selected.
Bear with me.
I was doing more of a comparison to agency, or agency to city with that respect.
Go ahead.
I do have a question in reviewing. Of course, you know it's going to be in regard to the leaves.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed we do get part of the revenue sharing.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. I appreciate that. But if we did not take our leaves there, where would Western get their leaves for this compost program?
I think, Jeff, can you answer that question?
Leaves on campus, I'm not sure whether the county would bring leaves to them. So we are the largest generator of that. We're bringing them to them. It benefits us in the fact that we're getting the leaves out of ditches and plugging storm drains and other problems that we have with that.
And I agree. I'm thankful for that. But my concern was we only get 25% of the revenue sharing. And they provide scholarships. They take this money and provide scholarships. I think that's great also. But what I'm wondering, to me, because we're giving them so many leaves, it almost seems like it should be a City of Bowling Green scholarship through Western Kentucky University. And I was wondering if that's ever been looked into, or if the city employees, their children, have an upper hand in getting a scholarship to Western, because in my opinion, it looks like the citizens of the City of Bowling Green are providing this revenue to Western to provide scholarships, which I'm all for, but I think the city, once again, should receive some benefit for this. And I applaud you. Thank you. You went to a lot of detail for all this research on this. I really appreciate it, to everyone.
Anybody have any other questions? I did have one on the first page, 7 or 8 items down. It says, as the designated PSAP, the city subsidizes the 911 center operations. The city expense is $1 million. Approximate savings to the agency is $400,000. Does that take into account the 911 fees that we receive?
It does, yes. The $1 million is over and above what the city receives from the county and then spends for the PSAP system.
So if
it costs us $1.6 million.
And $1 million of the $1 million of that $1.6 million the city contributes to run the PSAP.
That's correct.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind. Since this number wasn't totaled, I would like our citizens to know, because I think a lot of times, especially when it comes to agency funding during that part of the budget, the City Commission is beaten up quite a bit that we're not giving enough funding out to these agencies. I would like the citizens to know that based on the worksheet that you've prepared for us, Katie, $1,800,000 $872,605. 1872605. That's a lot of money. And on the other hand, we're saving these agencies, according to your numbers, $1,110,580. You could look at this two ways. The way I want to look at it, this city's doing a lot to give back to our community. And thank you to the staff, all the hours you put in for this. You all have done a great job.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate that. I know it was a lot of work, but it's a good exercise to find out
It was helpful
exactly
to us.
what we are doing.
Yeah, especially if you look at some of these agencies that have asked us for additional funds. We provide a good bit of funding now. And plus, like I said in my preamble, it's all about providing services. We're helping to subsidize or abet the cost of services for people in our community, which is a good leadership role for the city. Now, they'll reach a balancing point where we can't afford constantly to take that leadership role. We're going to have a more balanced approach. I think that's what Ms. Hill is trying to articulate, correct? But yeah, we should take great pride in this, because you look at these things, we do a lot for a lot of folks, and they're our citizens.
Yes, sir.
Oh, two things. One, commend Commissioner Hill
Yeah.
for bringing this to the forefront. It has been a very eye-opening exercise, and again, the staff has done an excellent job. Is this information going to be available on our internet site?
We can certainly post it if you like.
The more information that the citizens have about this, and I know we have a few that really get in and massage the numbers and look at something, maybe they'll have an opportunity to bring something else to our attention, but I would like to see it, information given out to the public in as many ways as we can.
Okay. And again, this just so that it is clear, it isn't everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not every single agency. It was just kind of picking the larger agencies that we do interact with. And obviously, we do have a lot of exchanges where we get something in return. And yes, we can absolutely identify that and post that on our website.
Good. Good job.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anything else? All right, thank you. Next item is...
Be careful. Be careful.
Mr. Childers is going to make a presentation on goats.
Brent, don't let him get your goat. That's all I got to tell you.
If I could,
Any number of goats.
I'd like to preamble this.
Yes, sir, please. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'll be brief. The story that Brent's going to tell today had its origin going back as far as 1990, in which the city tried to correct what has been an abandoned private cemetery in Hunting Creek. Mr. Waltrip, as well as other members of the commission, had been approached over the last year about what's the city going to do about it. So we have taken on the task to try to find a creative solution to this problem that will hopefully end up being a partnership between a private party and the city, and give both respect to those who are buried there, as well as providing a clean neighborhood environment for those who live in Hunting Creek. And I want to thank Brent for thinking outside the box, which he certainly has. My favorite picture is in your PowerPoint on page 5. I don't know who that guy is there on page 5 of your packet, but Brent's going to put together a show and tell for you on this issue. Brent?
Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. DeFebo, Mayor and Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to stand before you this afternoon and talk about a long-standing issue. As Mr. DeFebo talked, this has been one of those things that whenever I came to the city, I learned that we have a few issues that have been around for a long time, and this is one of those. And we might have a solution here with your all's consent, and I'll go through and talk about that. So what we're really talking about is Hunting Creek Cemetery. That's what I'll refer to it as. And it's located on Lois Lane, which is right here, And the property is actually outlined in red. It's just over 1 acre, and it borders 7 different properties. Here's William Natural Parkway, and you've got Western's Agricultural Farm here. So that everybody's familiar with what we're talking about. Mr. DeFebo talked about the article. I want to thank Tanya Collier with Planning and Zoning for saving this and having this available. She had sent it to Mr. DeFebo. This was from February of 1990. And I think I talked to Katie the other day, and she said, well, what was the intent back then? I said, Katie, I don't really know. I was in 4th grade whenever this article was printed. So I'm not really sure what the intent of everything was back then. But after reading the article, it seems like the city had showed up, bulldozers and dump trucks, ready to clear out the cemetery. Hadn't contacted the property owner. There was no real partnership. It was, we're the city, and we're here to fix it. And that's not the attitude that I've taken, nor is that the approach that we're trying to take in this. But just to let you know, this gives a reference of how long that this has been going on. That's 23 years ago before the city actually showed up to do something. The gentleman here, Joe Barrett, still lives next door. I spoke to him the other day. He's very supportive of this. I've had nothing but positive support from the neighbors. I've had not one phone call or email of negative support. You all might have. I have not. So just to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about. So this cemetery is an old family cemetery. It is the Covington Family Cemetery, and Hunting Creek has now built up around it. So it was originally the Covington Family Cemetery. It is controlled by George Covington. He lives in Illinois. He was not born in Bowling Green, although his father was. He still has some ties to the community. He used to come down here. I've spoken with him. We had a conversation a couple weeks ago to kind of go over some ideas for the property and things like that. He received the property from his father in 1977. It's been in the family since it was originally part of the family, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Talk about KRS 381-697, cemetery maintenance. This is the KRS that requires property owners of cemeteries to maintain the property. However, KRS also exempts out private family cemeteries. So there is nothing in state law that requires him to maintain the cemetery. So I want to make sure that you all understand that there is an exemption under state law for a private family cemetery. We don't have that exemption because we're not a private family cemetery. We own multiple cemeteries and take care of multiple cemeteries across the community. But we don't fall under that exemption. This is what it looks like now. And this was actually taken, I think, in February. I've walked the property 3 times. I've walked it in the summer, I've walked it in the fall, and I've walked it in the winter. I wanted to go back in the winter so I could see once all the green was gone, so you could actually see through there. And you can see the time of year that this is. The outside is much worse than the inside. If you look at it from the street, you'd think there's no way you could ever get through there. Once you get past this first row of scrub trees and brush, it opens up a little bit. But you still have a dense canopy up here that is protecting some of the undergrowth underneath, but you still have a lot of scrub, vines, things like that. You can't see the floor. So the whole time that Teddy and I walked through this, we had a shovel in our hands poking, just waiting to find a hole or something that we were going to fall into. So you can't really see what's in there other than just the brush and the undergrowth. Here's another picture just kind of show what it looks like. And what you're seeing here, this right here is an old stone wall that was built on the front left corner if you're facing the property. And there's several headstones in here. Some of the headstones go back to the early 1800s. Everyone I've seen is a Covington name. So we're talking about very old grave sites here. So this is what it looks like. Now, what can we do about it? There are some possible remedies that we could take. One is herbicide. Imagine going through there with a sprayer full of Roundup and just spraying everything. That works in some applications. However, for the protection of our stormwater and our water system here locally, and also for the protection of the neighbors, I don't recommend this. You have a lot of residual, you have a lot of overspray. To get that much herbicide in the air and to get that much herbicide on the ground, you're going to have to put a lot of herbicide in the air. I don't think that that's the preferred method. The next method, manual labor. That's expensive. That's a lot of time with guys in there with chainsaws, hand tools, things like that, cutting all that out by hand. That gets expensive pretty quickly. Another option, heavy equipment. We could send, like the city tried to do 25 years ago, bulldozers and dump trucks in there. We're talking about inside of residential development. This is in a neighborhood. This is not a construction site. These houses have been here for a number of years. This is also expensive. That equipment has a high hourly rate, so there's a cost to that. Other option, controlled burning. In a rural environment, that'd be a great method. Still used, very popular in the forest industry. On a 1 acre lot inside a subdivision, I would not recommend it one bit. However, it is an effective land management tool. So, our recommendation.
Hey.
Billy the Goat. This is our recommendation. And I know that this is quite humorous, and I've received several emails and texts over the last couple of days about this, and the staff in the office has been teasing me about this idea for some time. But I don't want you to think that Brent is just making this up, that I'm pulling this out, and this is a proven technique. Goats have a lot of benefits. They're quiet. They're not heavy equipment. They eat about 8 to 12 hours a day. They eat a lot of different things. They use no fuel. They have very little emissions. That is right. They have very little. They're able to access difficult terrain, steep areas. They do not damage the land. And I think that's what's most important since we're talking about a cemetery. We're talking about some of the pioneers of Warren County that are buried in this cemetery, some of the early people that helped settle this place and make this place home. And I think that's important to understand, that we're not in there to destroy the cemetery, we're in there to clean it up. And that's our goal. This is a project in Tyrone, North Carolina. This was a city-owned property. It's about a 2 acre property, and they put 20 goats in there. And you can see the kudzu. If you've been around the South, you know what kudzu is. You can see all that's overgrown. 1 week, you can see how much of it's gone. 1 month, how much of it's gone. So this is a proven technique. And the other thing, look here. What do you see? You still see green. You still see the kudzu. You still see the vines. What you don't see is this structure, this concrete structure. You don't see all the debris, the rock, the other things in there. When you start running heavy equipment and you can't see what's down there, you start damaging equipment. You start damaging people. You start hurting people. Animals, the goats, can eat around all that. They're much more low impact. You don't have near as much risk there. That's why we want to use them as the initial cleanup crew, so we can see what we've got underneath there, and then we can make smart decisions on moving forward to clean everything up. This is the Ronald Reagan National Library in Simi Valley, California. They use 900 goats about once a year for fire prevention. If you've been following the news lately, wildfires are spreading across California again. This is an annual thing. This is prime wildfire country. So they bring the goats out to clean these undergrowth and brush out to prevent wildfires on their area. Here's some other places that have used goats. Mesa, Arizona, Los Cruces, New Mexico. Google uses it to clean their headquarters, to clean around their headquarters. Yahoo, Seattle Tacoma International Airport, and the Vanderbilt Mansion in Hyde Park, New York. This is very popular out west. You get in California, you have the much steeper terrain changes where you can't get equipment. Goats are about the only alternative that you have. Here, it's not as much about terrain, it's more about impact and cost. Cost is always important. So here's our plan. Use the goats for about a month. Let them clear out the undergrowth so that we can actually know what we've got in there. Now, under the Animal Control Ordinance, Chapter 5, Part 201, requires 2 acres to have any livestock. So I would request that we exempt our goat contractor from that. We've spoken, there's a company in Glasgow that does this. They're the only one in Kentucky that we've been able to find. He works with the University of Kentucky's Agricultural Department. That's who trained him on this. He does this type of work. We have an estimate from him. He has been to the site. He knows what he's getting into. He's familiar with this type of work. He's done other cemetery cleanings in Barron County. But we would ask that you exempt him from that because he is a contractor of the city. But I did want to make you aware that animal control ordinance is out there. After the goats clear out the underbrush, then we can look at, okay, what trees are in here that need to go. You saw from the aerial before the number of houses that are in close proximity. We would have our arborists go in, identify the trees that need to be removed that are in danger of falling on someone's house, those types of things, and then clear out any remaining brush. Goats will do good at eating the green. They're not always great about eating the woody biomass, the stems and things like that. So we'd still have to cut out some of that. So I'm not saying that we're not using herbicide, that we're not using heavy equipment, we're not using manual labor. Our goal is to use goats on the beginning to reduce the cost of everything else. Some time back, I had Teddy take one of our contractors out there to look at it that does a lot of cleanup work for us in the city. And we've seen him on jobs that are bad. And he gets out of the truck and says, "Are you kidding me? $50,000 to show up just to get started." That was our estimate that we were given. And this is someone that's done work for us for a number of years on a number of different projects. So after we get all that cleaned out, we'll go back in, sow some type of preventative ground cover. We'll work with our landscaping division to identify what the appropriate material is there and establish the land management plan. Goats are not the end-all be-all. They are the first step. We still have to develop a plan to prevent this in the future. The initial cost for cleanup we estimate to be $25,000 to $30,000. By using the goats, we believe we can reduce the cost of everything else and have our annual maintenance cost to $30,000 to $3,000 a year. Sorry. Talked earlier about the partnership, talking with Mr. Covington. He had actually, my understanding, proposed this some time back, where he would make a contribution, someone would take it on, and then it would be their responsibility. So that's what we're here to talk about, is really developing that partnership. I do not have a commitment from him, but he is okay in moving forward. I've told him our budget. He's okay in moving forward with that. So the way this would work is his donation, our hope, would cover the upfront cost, but the city would assume the long-term maintenance of the property. That's the only way to prevent this. If we go in there and clean it today, a year from now, it'll be almost as bad as it is now. That's part of the land management plan. And it will never reach Fairview Cemetery. So I want to make sure that you all are aware and the neighbors are aware that property has been maintained as a cemetery for 100 years. It has been under a land management. You have to constantly take care of these things. So this would take a process. It will still be a natural site. We want to try to leave some of the taller trees to create that canopy, to dissuade any undergrowth as much as possible, and just try to keep some ground cover down there that's mowable, something that we can take care of to reduce our annual cost. City would own the property, and the other part, and this is the neat part to me, is erect a sign telling the Covington family story. My understanding, this all started with Elijah Covington, who was land granted 15,000 acres for his service in the Revolutionary War. That's where all this started. Covington Woods Park is part of this family. Covington Street is part of this family. Another one of the uncles or grandfathers or somewhere in the lineage was the city attorney for the city of Bowling Green. So there is a lot of history between the city of Bowling Green and the Covington family. And I think that is one way of preserving the cemetery, preserving the Covington family story. Whenever I mentioned that to Mr. Covington, he was extremely pleased with that. I think now is our opportunity to move forward with this. And then Mr. Covington expressed this to me. He's 70 years old. He has 3 children. They've never been to Bowling Green. They have no idea what the cemetery is, and they live all over the country. So if something was to happen to him, we would have no contact to try to develop this partnership. So if we want to make this partnership, now is that time. Here's the cemetery again, identified. This is the area in red that we sent notices out to. I drafted a letter last week and sent it out to the homeowners and occupants in that area, making them aware. We have a couple here tonight. I don't think they want to make any comments, but they are here. And like I said previously, I've heard nothing but positive support from the people who have contacted me. We wanted to make sure that they were aware of what we were trying to achieve, what our goal was, and where we're trying to get to. Because if we don't have their support on the front end, it makes it for a much more difficult project on the back end. So, with your approval, I'll move forward with developing the formal partnership, developing the agreement with Mr. Covington. And then after we have that, we have title to the property, we have a donation, we move forward with the contracting of the firms, getting everything cleared out, and then the city maintains it in perpetuity. I want to make sure you understand that. Then it is the city's. Once it's ours, it's ours. So there is a long term here, but I think that the stars have aligned to give us the opportunity to have the best deal possible if the city is willing to do something with the Hunting Creek Cemetery. And I'm open to any questions that you might have. I am not a goat expert, but I'll try to answer anything that I can.
Did you have any further comments?
Yeah, Brent, maybe just for the commission and for the public, can you talk about the rules of engagement that we would have with the goat contractor? Because I'm sure some people would worry about Lynn lives in the neighborhood. What's he do when the goat shows up on his front porch? I mean,
Right.
what would it?
The goats would be his responsibility. We're just
Lynn's or the
No,
contractor?
the goat contractor. Goat Browsers is the name of the company. They would be his responsibility. He would have someone come by to check on the goats at least once a day, and would also put some signs up with his phone number. So if a goat does get out, then there would be a contact there for him to come down and take care of that. The property is about 98% fenced. Talking with Mr. Barrett, there's one section on his side where the fence was removed. He removed it during the ice storm several years back, so they could cut some trees out, and he never put it back up because nothing was in there. But we would have to go back in and patch that section of fence, but we think that we could achieve that pretty easily.
Yes, ma'am.
Go on with him if you want.
A big party.
Well, he was right. You want me to go first?
You say you've had nothing but positive comments from the homeowners. Has there been negative in the past, and
I think the
if so,
negative in
what?
the past was from Mr. Barrett. If we go back to the article, he was the one locking the gate to prevent the city from coming in, and he held the key to that gate for some time. He is now, I talked to him the other day, he called me the other day, and he was ecstatic about it. He thought it was great. So he was one that had some resistance in the past, is my understanding. Of course, all this predates me by probably over a decade now. So.
Go ahead.
Thank you for all this work. And I'd also like to thank Cora Jane Spiller. She sent me a very lengthy, detailed email regarding the history of this project. And I really appreciate that. And I'm not sure if you know this, but one of the sons, who is now deceased, the son from Chicago, had offered to purchase a wrought iron fence for that cemetery and worked with Landmark at that time, and they refused it. So I would encourage, of course, this son is now deceased, but in your working with the Covington family, maybe they would still be willing to put a nice wrought iron fence around it. That would, I think, make it look a lot better than the chain link fence also. And according to Cora Jane, apparently there's been animals there before.
Yes.
And
my understanding of the story is that there were 2 goats that were kept in there previously to keep it cleaned out. And I showed you the proximity to the Western's Ag Farm right there. And Western had done some manure spreading or cleaning over there, and the smells of that were coming across the Hunting Creek neighborhood. And they had complained to the city about the goats on the property, and my understanding that the city had asked them to remove the goats. And now, some 20 years later, the city is now coming back, and I'm standing here before you recommending that we use goats to clean up the cemetery. So that's my understanding of that story.
I just wanted you to know they did offer the family at one time for a fence. I think that would be very pretty.
Okay.
So.
Yes, sir.
There are a couple of critical things here. One is maintaining the respect of the Covington family and entering into a cemetery. So I commend you for having that sensitivity. The other thing I'd like to do is thank Mr. Tom Morgan for his persistence in this. And Magistrate Tony Payne is also involved in trying to help this long-term problem. And I'm so pleased that it looks like that we're going to see a resolution of this. And again, thank staff, particularly you, Brent. Why you didn't stop accepting my phone calls about some of this, I'm still not real sure. But thank you for what you did, Kevin. And again, it's going to just make for a beautiful community, Hunting Creek, and this is just going to add to that. So thank you.
We only may have one small problem. I got a call from the Discovery Channel. They want to do a reality show on Brent and the Goat Man, so he might not have time to do that.
live action?
Will they pay us for that, please?
We'll get a cut of Brent's contract.
That's right. I just said we
Yeah.
get the...
I've got a couple of questions on what kind of precedent does this set for people abandoning property in the city if we start doing this, and why aren't they taking care of it themselves? If it's an important family heirloom, why would they not take care of their own property?
I understand, and that's one of my concerns moving forward with this. This one is unique in that the Covington family would be paying the cost. There is no requirement, no, not in perpetuity, but the upfront cost. There is no requirement for them to maintain this property. He lives out of state, has always lived out of state, and we've never really had anything to require him to maintain this property. We haven't had any type of enforcement because they're exempted under state law, asking them to maintain. In other wooded areas, we would not ask somebody to clean out a wooded area in any other residential area.
I know that we do on like the public benefit from the stormwater retention basins or sinkholes.
Right.
We have a program where we will come in and partner with them, sharing the cost to get it cleaned up, and then it's up to them to take care of it at that point. I'm trying to see the difference between that issue and this issue here, other than state law says he can just let it grow however he wants to.
This is a different situation. This is a recommendation to you all about how to clean it up if you want to move forward with that. As far as an enforcement mechanism on our end, I've never felt like we've had one to move forward with. As far as a precedent on what we're going to do with the next one, this one is a unique circumstance. So I mean, if somebody else came to us, we'd stand back before you again and say that.
I just wonder about the cemetery on Scotts Road's been in bankruptcy a couple of times, and how they begged us to take over that thing, and we've declined. Does this say then, okay, I can just let it go, and then the city will come in and take it over? I don't know.
I don't know.
Well,
Is there some, I mean, would it be, and I don't know, would it be appropriate to move these graves to a Covington section of the cemetery and then perhaps make this lot available for development, and that way we wouldn't have to take our equipment out there?
Right. There is a process for the removal of graves. That's controlled by the state, and that's a lengthy and expensive process. Now, given the age of these grave sites, I don't know what would be left to move. I mean, at this point, we're talking, some of these could be 200 years old. I mean, that is much more expensive than this. That has a very high upfront capital cost. This is an alternative that I'm proposing to you all. I mean, I can't move forward without your approval on this project. I wouldn't do it. That's why I'm presenting it to you all to let me know, move forward, yes, we're okay, or however you want to proceed.
If I can say something, I think while Mayor was here, I think we may have already done this once before. I think down at the ITA,
What?
didn't we pick up a family cemetery there, I think?
Say
Does the city
again?
maintain that one?
We do not maintain it.
Who, ITA does, or?
We mow around it.
Okay. So I know there's a family cemetery there in the ITA land.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was wondering, is it, once the city got it cleaned up and it looks really pretty, is it something the neighborhood association would be willing to help us out with?
I contacted them whenever I started this process about a year ago, and did not find much interest from them in moving forward to that. I think that they're a small neighborhood association with very limited funding, and they weren't willing to step forward at that time. The first 6 months was me trying to find somebody else to take it, either a cemetery preservation group, some other entity that does these types of things. And then once I was unsuccessful in finding that type of organization, that's why the city is now making this presentation to you all.
I think you have a very, very creative option to deal with it, and I'm in support of that. It's just the in perpetuity part of it that I have issues with. That becomes ours forever.
I understand. And I didn't want to hide any of that. I mean, I tried to
Yeah.
make sure that you all were aware of
Sure.
that.
I just
Yes.
had, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and Bruce's questions are obviously very valid. But sometimes, again, the city just has to take on some issues. And when I looked at that initially, I thought I sure wouldn't want to live next door to that mess. And so again, I think it's just one of the responsibilities of the city to, if there's no other means to rectify the problem, sometimes we do have to step in. And each of these decisions would be based on if somebody else comes forward, if they have a valid point, we may have to make the same decision. If they don't, we can always say no. But again, for the neighbors out there. I think what you've done is exactly the way that we should move forward, and I support what you're doing and what you presented to us 100%.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, a couple points. I'm going to read from the 1990 article, which is illustrative. This is Mr. Barrett speaking. It's become a wildlife sanctuary. I don't want to see it destroyed. Also, Mr. Covington talks about this being an oasis for nature and the fact that he didn't want this site vandalized by either heavy equipment or by neglect, even though he didn't personally take care of it. But he's willing to now. We looked at this, given these comments. First of all, it's important for us to realize, Brent and I have talked about this, we don't intend to have this become a manicured cemetery. This will stay somewhat like a manageable wildlife sanctuary that shows a modicum respect to those who are buried there. And it would still have somewhat a wild but controlled look to it, and maybe provide some ancillary benefit to the neighborhood as a green space. We thought that was one of the differences why we would maybe step forward. And it was our chance, I think, or the city's chance to make a difference. And that's why we undertook it, because it was a tough problem and we wanted to figure if we could work it. So we understand it taking it on forever. It'd be nice if some group would come forward, like a cemetery group, who would take this and maintain it. But our intent was only, maybe 3 times a year go there and use our existing either cemetery or other staff to do generalized pickup and cleaning. If we put the right type of ground cover, you call, we would have less work to do and just be managing the natural area there.
I made a phone call to the State Historic Preservation Office to talk to their cemetery person. I mean, that's all she deals with is cemeteries. And I said, are there any groups out there, that take on these types of projects that, this is their thing? And she had only known of a couple of groups that did it just in very localized areas. Like they only did it in their county, and none of them were in Warren County. I think there was one in central Kentucky and one in eastern Kentucky, and they would take them on. There was a small group of volunteers that would go in and clean them up and preserve them and things like that. But they only did it in their county. And I've not found a similar type of group here in Warren County.
Yes, ma'am.
With respect to a consensus, I think I've seen 2 of you, and specifically voice support for Commissioner Waltrip and Commissioner Hill. Is there at least one more of you in terms of consensus?
Again, I think the opportunity to clean it up is great. I'm not interested in taking care of a family cemetery when they're not interested in taking care of it. But that's just me.
Commissioner Williams?
I think that kind of puts me on the hot spot. Well, I commend all of you for your work on this and the creative thinking. I personally have a problem with that too, but I think we have to look at the opportunity to see if we can clean this mess up, see if there's some way that we can do this. I hate to set a precedent like this as well, but I think we probably ought to try to move forward.
So at least we can move forward with the initial cleanup and then kind of go from there.
Yeah.
Is that?
Okay.
Well, does that, I don't know what that means. I'm saying from my perspective, I want to move forward with your recommendation. So,
Which is contingent on the Covington family agreeing to give us that money.
Yes.
It'd be also helpful if they could, through some savvy negotiation, set up some kind of trust fund for help with perpetual care. I think we would probably look at that aspect in our request, but I don't know if they'll agree to that, but that might be helpful.
And I think the selling point to that is that we're honoring their family with the sign.
Right.
I think that's great. So get your negotiating hat on and good luck.
All right.
I do appreciate the thorough nature with which you've dealt with it, even contacted everybody about trying to pick it up. So, any other comments or discussion? Are there any items from the commission that you'd like to discuss that we haven't put on the agenda for the work session? All right, we'll return then at 7 o'clock for a regular meeting. Thank you for coming.